All right. On immigration, you've made a really interesting point, which is that numbers matter, but integration matters more.
Yes, culture matters more, yes.
Yeah. When you talk about this, who are you talking about, and why would integration be more difficult for some rather than others?
Trevor, you've asked me this question before, I remember.
And I didn't get an answer then, so I'm asking you again.
Actually, you got a very, very clear answer. And one of the things that I don't think we have been doing in this country properly is having a proper immigration strategy. And many people assume that it's just something that government does. It has to go well beyond government. All of society has to do it. And that's what used to happen when we had immigration in much smaller, much more manageable numbers. And the numbers that we have seen over the last few decades mean that we are getting people having separate and insular communities. The most extreme example of this is what we saw with the rape gangs, where people who've been coming to this country from the 60s, from a particular region and sub-community in Pakistan, get here, stay insular, not interested in integration, and then you start seeing very, very toxic, I would say evil habits propagating, and no one doing anything about it because they're separate. We have to make sure that we have a dominant culture in our country, and the people who move here want to help make the UK a better place. Our country is not a hotel, it's not a dormitory, this is our home.
But you have made a separate point, or perhaps a connected point, about who those people are, and basically who you would prefer to come
Oh, what did I say specifically? What do you mean?
You said that you worried about peasants who form sub-communities. Now, you can explain to me what you mean, but one way of reading this would be that you would prefer to have more middle-class Nigerians and fewer people from rural backgrounds in Bangladesh.
Let me be very, very clear. Immigration is too high, across the board, legal or illegal. But the point I was making there was about a specific report on that community of people who are predominant in the rape gangs. They did come from a particular place where they were mostly peasant farmers. They were insular, even from the rest of Pakistan. They're not like the people in Lahore. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to fix. I hear a lot of people talk about Asian grooming gangs, about Pakistani grooming gangs. A lot of people are being blamed. A lot of innocent people who happen to share characteristics are being blamed. So let's be specific. That was a literal word that has evidence behind it about where these people have come from, what they have been doing. And we should not be afraid to talk about that.
So we're going to apply a class lens to our immigration.
And this is, Trevor, forgive me, this is one of the problems, that when there is an issue where we have victims, girls are being raped and attacked, the conversation is more about the language that we're using. Well, what should we call the people? We can't be shy about things like that. And that's what I'm most interested in, the victims.
I'm interrupting you because you routinely complain that you're misquoted and misunderstood by people like me. Now, I just want to be clear.
Not often.
Okay,
I think you're quite
often
fair.
enough. I want to give you the opportunity to be clear.
Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has controversially linked the grooming gang scandals to high levels of immigration, claiming that inadequate integration among certain communities has exacerbated the crisis. Speaking candidly, Badenoch described the grooming gang phenomenon as an extreme example of the consequences when immigration fosters isolated, insular communities detached from broader UK society. The numbers we've seen over the last few decades mean that we are creating separate and insular communities, Badenoch argued, pointing to historical immigration patterns. She added, the most extreme example of this is the rape gangs. People who came here from the 1960s, largely from specific regions and sub-communities in Pakistan, stayed insular, uninterested in integration. This led to very toxic, even evil, behaviors propagating unchecked because of their isolation. In her appearance on Sky News' Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips, Badenoch expanded on her controversial remarks, defending her characterization of certain groups as peasants who had maintained their insularity even within their home countries. These individuals came predominantly from rural, farming communities in Pakistan, which were themselves cut off from mainstream Pakistani society, including cities like Lahore, she noted. It's critical we are specific about the origins of this issue to avoid unfairly blaming broader communities. Her comments have reignited accusations of Islamophobia, with Green Party co-leader Carla Denier labeling the remarks shockingly offensive and irresponsible. Critics have also highlighted the potential harm in further stigmatizing British Pakistani communities, many of whom have repeatedly denounced the crimes and supported calls for justice. The grooming gang crisis has left a dark stain on the country's social fabric. An independent report by Professor Alexis Jay in 2014 revealed that at least 1,400 girls were exploited in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013, primarily by men of Pakistani descent. Similar atrocities were uncovered in Telford, where over 1,000 children are estimated to have been abused over 3 decades, and Rochdale, where an inquiry identified 74 probable victims. In response, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has announced a series of measures aimed at delivering justice to survivors and addressing systemic failures. A new initiative will allow victims to request reviews of closed cases by an independent criminal justice panel, supported by EP's $2.5 million in funding for stronger investigations. Cooper has also commissioned a national audit, led by Baroness Louise Casey, to examine the scope and profile of group-based child sexual abuse across the UK, including an inquiry into the ethnicity of offenders. The Conservative leader's remarks reflect a broader debate about the intersection of immigration, integration, and criminality, a discussion fraught with sensitivities in Britain's multicultural society. Badenoch emphasized that immigration must be managed to foster a dominant culture that new arrivals are encouraged to join. Our country is not a hotel or a dormitory. This is our home, and we need people who move here to make the UK a better place. As the government intensifies efforts to hold perpetrators accountable and prevent future abuse, the challenge remains in balancing robust action against criminality with safeguarding the cohesion of a diverse nation. Whether Badenoch's rhetoric will resonate with voters or deepen divisions within the political discourse remains to be seen.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now. Whose streets? Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets.
Citizens, we stand on a great threshold. The time for action has come. The time for action is now. We are being called to reclaim Britain as our own and to deliver justice to those who have had their lives destroyed by migrant terrorism. We owe it to our forefathers and our children to return Britain to its former glory, magnificent and proud, and most of all, unafraid. Well, today, patriots, fear no longer controls us. We control fear. Citizens, I have a question for you. Do you stand with me? Yeah. Do I have the political will? Yeah. The occupation of Britain must end. The liberation of Britain begins today. Are you with me? Yeah. Are you with me? Yeah. The revolution has begun. Forward march! Yeah.
Nick Tenconi, a prominent political figure on the rise, led a charged street march this weekend, targeting the Labour government with fiery rhetoric. Tenconi's message called for urgent action to reclaim Britain from what he described as growing threats to the nation's identity and integrity. In a bid to rally support, he framed his movement as a fight for liberation against inequality and a government he accuses of fostering a two-tier system. Central to Tenconi's rhetoric was the claim that urgent action is necessary to address what he sees as systemic failures under Labour's leadership. His criticism extended beyond policies to the broader cultural and social dynamics he believes are eroding the country's unity. "We are fighting for liberation," he proclaimed, casting his movement as a moral crusade against the forces he alleges are undermining the nation. The emphasis on reclaiming Britain struck a chord with attendees, many of whom expressed dissatisfaction with what they view as the government's inability to address their concerns. However, the march and Tenkoni's rhetoric have not been without controversy. Critics accuse him of stoking divisions and offering little in the way of concrete solutions. Opponents argue that his references to a two-tier system and calls for Britain to reclaim its identity risk alienating communities and fueling populist sentiment. While his language resonates with disaffected groups, some political analysts caution that without clear policy proposals, his movement may struggle to achieve sustained momentum. The march also underscores a growing polarization in British politics, where populist movements are increasingly framing themselves as voices of the disenfranchised. Tenkoni's appeal to patriotism and his critique of a supposedly failing system reflect a broader trend among leaders seeking to channel public frustration into political action. Whether this momentum will translate into significant political influence remains to be seen. But Tenkoni's rhetoric has undeniably added to the intensity of Britain's current political discourse. As his supporters dispersed, Tenkoni vowed to continue his campaign, promising more protests and a louder voice for those he claims have been left behind. His movement may face challenges in overcoming criticism and skepticism, but its ability to tap into the growing discontent among segments of the electorate could make it a force to watch in the months ahead. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates. Join the conversation and connect with us on Telegram. Link in the description below.